It's real easy to see how those 5 shapes are connected through crystalline structure. It's just because they are so obviously related to it. But when you look at an organic structure like this fetus of this baby, or yourself in a mirror, or a tree, or a bug, or something like this, and I say to you, the same 5 structures are creating those shapes, and just as much as in the crystalline structures. I mean, it just doesn't look like it. You don't see any geometry in there. Organic chemistry tends to be soft and curvy and doesn't have any straight lines and all this kind of stuff. We don't see where any of this is, so it just doesn't seem like it's possible. And until you look very, very carefully, because hidden in organic chemistry is all these very things that we just saw in crystals. In order to do that, we're going to begin to look at conception. We're going to start at the very, very beginning of human life and work our way out from there. And in conception, the conceptual process that I'm about to show, though we're going to be talking about it in terms of humans, will apply to all life forms known. That's A-L-L, underlined. All of them, the entire spectrum of life on this planet that we know of, they'll all move through these same exact steps in the same exact way, though we will be talking about humans. So we'll begin with, the process begins with a sphere, the first sacred form. The ovum is a round ball. It's a really round ball. It's not kind of round or sort of round. It's perfectly round. It looks like the moon, if you can see. It's you take a chicken egg, I always say that when you hard boil it. You take the yolk out of the middle. Have you ever done that? And you look at it? It's really round. It holds, that's the most female form there is. And so the female chose that shape. If it was a male that had the womb, it would probably be a cube. So this is a sea urchin ovum with a little sea urchin sperm on there. At least I hope so. And so it begins as a sphere. Now, the membrane of the ovum is called the zona pellucida. Remember the word zona pellucida, because I'm going to refer to it a whole bunch of times, which is just the membrane of the first cell. And inside the zona pellucida, there are these 2 little bodies that are called polar bodies, and they're embedded inside the membrane. And then in here is a liquid, and inside that liquid is another sphere, which is called the female pronucleus, and it contains 22 plus 1 chromosomes. They always say plus 1 because the other one is the one that determines sex. I should really just say 23 chromosomes. The process that I'm going to describe, mitosis, is what that's called, cell division, is going to begin, if this was the ovum here, this little sphere, the cell divisions, the cells that are going to divide are going to get littler and littler and littler inside of it, but the outer surface of the zona pellucida is going to remain fixed. It doesn't change size. Okay, that's kind of an important part of this. You'll see later. And the ovum, which you can actually see with the naked eye, it's 200 times bigger than the average cell in the body. You can see it without a microscope. It's the only one you can. It's this huge single cell that, again, the division will get smaller and smaller and smaller inside it until it reaches 512 cells, at which point the average size of the human cell will have been reached. And so the process first goes within itself to figure out how it's done, and then it turns around and expands beyond itself. This is even in the geometry. Here's the ovum saturated with a sperm. Now, you probably read in your books that it takes one sperm to conceive a baby. And now they've known actually for some time now with the use of electron microscopes that that's not true. That was only a partial truth. The whole truth is that it takes 10, 11, or 12 sperm that join around the 11th, 12th, or 13th sperm, which forms some kind of energy package that allow that one single sperm to go in. The single sperm cannot go through there by itself. It needs these other 10 or 11 or 12 guys to be able to get them through. So anyway, it definitely, though, does take 10, 11, or 12 sperm to allow this one to go in. And he enters in and begins swimming toward the pronucleus. The next thing that happens is the tail breaks off of that little head and just disappears. Just goes away. And the little tiny head expands out very quickly and becomes a perfect sphere, exactly the same size as the female pronucleus. This exactly the same size is very important, I believe, judging by what I know about the geometries, because the next motion is that they merge through each other and form the Vesica Pisces, the image of the first day of Genesis. So at this moment, they contain all the knowledge of the universe between them by their very geometries. And they can't form that perfect image unless the male is identical to her. And I have a belief here, though there's no scientific basis on it. Just as each person in this room would penetrate into the darkness a certain distance, so our natural abilities that we have a different size sphere around each one of us, I think each one of these sperm also has a different size sphere around them that she can sense. And I don't think that she's going to allow any of these guys in here unless they have the perfect size, unless the resonance of that sphere is identical to hers. And for this reason, I think that there could be a male and a female that could try all they want and never have a baby. Because if their spherical sizes of their natures are too different, they won't correspond. Because it's so obvious to me from this fact here that this must take place. Then, on the very next step that happens after that, they merge right through each other and they become a single cell, and they contain the 46 chromosomes of life. This is called the human zygote, and it's the first cell of the human body. There it is. That's a mouse, though. Doesn't look like one, does it? But there's it's starting to go to number 2 there. There's the fertilized egg of a mouse. That's an electron microscope view of one. The next thing that happens is the two little polar bodies migrate and they find a place that is north-south, which I believe lines up with mommy-daddy. And with mommy, rather. They tune to her field. And from the north, and I believe it's from the north, a tube runs down to the south and just sort of appears out of nowhere very quickly. It's a little thread. It's actually, I don't show it here, but it's attached at the top and the bottom, a tube right down the center. And then the chromosomes of the first cell break in half and line up along that tube, half on one side and half on the other. And what you have here right now is, as you see the electromagnetic fields of your own body later, you're going to see that this is really an abstract view of you when you're an adult. You're going to see that you have a north and a south pole. You're going to realize you have a tube down the middle, that you have a sphere of energy around that, and that half of you is on one side and half of you is on the other side. It's really very close to what the ultimate end will be, though the actual dimensions of your body are also about to be contained in here. The actual precise dimensions of the adult human. It takes a couple more steps here before that takes place. So the next thing that happens is you then go from 1 cells to 2, and there's the mouse egg again showing they've taken off the zona pellucida, so you have the 2 cells there like that. And it then goes from 2 to 4. Most of your books, it shows this. They didn't really know for a long time what happened, so they usually just put them in a square or something like that. They didn't know what shape it took, but now they do know. And the shape is that it forms a tetrahedron when the 4 cells line up on the 4 points of this tetrahedron, and lined up with the north-south. It could be the other way around too. You got 3 of them up here and 1 down here. Now to show you that using geometry, this would be the zona pellucida here, the inner surface of it, and these are the 4 cells lining up like that, which is the tightest compact way that you can get 4 cells into a sphere. And this would be a top view if you were looking down from below. It'd be like putting 3 and 1 more stacked in the middle. So that if you connected the centers together, you get a tetrahedron. And this is an actual view of a tetrahedral mouse egg. Here's your first cell, your second, your third, and this back here over here is the 4th one. If you don't look at this one here. You went across here, you get a triangle, and then if you ran those triangles over to this other one that's back over here, the bigger one, you would get a tetrahedron. This is beginning to go to the next step. It's real hard for them to get, this thing is going so fast, that it's very hard for them to get it exactly at the proper stage. So now you have you, you exist as a tetrahedron. And the next thing that happens, it goes from 4 to 8. And what it does is it forms another tetrahedron facing the other way and forms a star tetrahedron, like this. So that the 8 cells are on there, which looks like this. It forms the egg of life, the second sacred form that came out of the second rotation of Genesis. This is what you would see. This particular level of life, according to the angels, is one of the most important stages of development of organic chemistry, or of human beings or anything else. Every life form passes through this stage. Flies, everything else, even mosquitoes. They all go through it. And they all end up looking like these 8 little spheres. And what science knows about this is that they can't, first of all, they can't tell any difference between these spheres. They appear to be absolutely identical. It would be like 8 identical twins in the room. They can't see any differences at all. They can't detect any differences at all. And though usually you can tell a difference between one cell and another, they can't on this one at all, not at this level. And they found that they can sever the bonds of this right between these two and get 2 of these like that and make 2 identical beings. Or they can sever the bonds this way and make 4 identical beings. I don't know. In the works that I've read, I haven't seen them do this yet, but theoretically they could sever this into 8 different ways and make 8. Well, I don't know anybody that's done that. And what the angels say is that these 8 cells, first of all, are immortal relative to your body. They remain with your body as long as your body is alive, unless something terrible happens to that part of your body and they get blown away. I don't know what that really means spiritually. But they will remain in your body. Most of the cells in your body will be regenerated. They die and new ones are formed every 5 to 7 years. So every 5 to 7 years, depending on what your cycle is, you completely replace your body with a brand new body. But these cells stay there from day 1 all the way to the end. They never die. That's not science saying that. Science doesn't even know where they're located. And the angels also say that the precise location of them is down near the base of the spine. and that is straight underneath the perineum, going up from there, and a short distance up from underneath and there, up inside of there. It's where they're located, which happens to be the geometrical center of your body. If you were to measure your body from that point at the base of your spine to the top of your head, and then from that base down to the bottom of your feet, same distance. It's exactly the same. That is, if you take 100 people and measure them, you might be a little longer and you might have short legs or something like that. And they said that this is closer to who you really are, though it may seem kind of funny, really more who you really are. It's 8 spheres. At one point I'm going to talk about Egyptian Tantra. We have 8 aspects to ourselves. That's the reason why there's 8 electrical circuits moving through our body. There's 8 totally different aspects to ourselves. And we have 8 different, completely, totally different lives associated with ourselves, according to Egyptian Tantra. At the right time I will talk about this more. We need to lay out more before I can really get into that. But their concepts of Tantra and life and everything is far more expanded than Hindu or Tibetan or Taoist or any of these other ways. So anyway, this is one of the stages of it, and it's the egg of life, the first pattern that we're talking about. We're going to come back to it and talk about it many, many, many times more again. It then goes from 8 to 16. And this is the view of those 8 cells from, this is one edge of it, this is a hexagonal aerial view of those 8 cells packed in there. This is the electron microscope view of that. It's starting to twist a little bit. This one doesn't count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there'd be 7, 8. They would form a cube in there. That's the other thing is the start, this thing is the same as this thing. Everybody sees that, don't you? Which is a cube also. So they go from tetrahedral to star tetrahedral to cubical. And then at that point it goes to 8, and this little guy forms one out on the edge of each one. Let me see if there's, I didn't put it in there. But it first goes out one on the out. It first becomes a cube within a cube. One goes out here on the other edge, just like that comes out of Metatron's cube. The cube that comes out as a cube within a cube, and it forms a cube within a cube. And then that's the last time it gets symmetrical. Because if you make one of those models, which I've done, you first you go to 8, then you go to 16. Then you take 16 more and you put them in symmetrically. Only there's 2 places left over, no matter how you do it. There's 2 empty spots. And so when you go to 32, and you take 32 and you fill in those 2 spots and you try to make it symmetrical, it just starts going funny. And that's exactly what happens in life. You know what I mean? The little perfect cube forms a cube within a cube, and then it starts doing this funny thing, and it starts becoming a blob. And the blob starts growing in such a way that it becomes hollow and turns into a sphere, a hollow sphere. And then at the North and the South Pole, led by probably the 8 cells, is what I suspect, a tube begins to drop down through the middle and go down and connect to the south one like this. This is an actual electron microscope of it. This is the hollow ball. At this point there's 512 cells in here. And and it's a torus, by the way, too. The north palm becomes this, and this toroidal pattern forms down through the center and forms this structure through the middle. And you have a structure that is identical to an apple. It looks just like one, only it's hollow in the middle. Can you see this core? running through here. They've ripped this apart so you can see inside of there. And what then happens is that this opening here becomes your mouth. The other end becomes your anus. This end, inside of this core becomes your internal structure where your organs are. These become your lung structures in here, where this is. And this is the last time that we have everything in common. In other words, every life form goes from, just to recap this, every life form goes from a sphere to a tetrahedron, to a star tetrahedron, to a cube made in the form of this one here. Then from a cube it turns back into a sphere again, and then becomes a torus and the shape of the apple. All of these are all these sacred shapes that we saw out of the Metatron's cube. And every living form known that becomes the apple, and then from the apple, then it depends. If it's a fly, little wings come out, or if it's a dog, a little tail starts wagging. You know? Or if it's a horse, it wants to gallop. Or if it's a person, we sort of stand there and wait for it to happen. But we all have this in common. That's why I really do. I think the Bible said that the tree, the fruit tree that we bit of in the Bible, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that got us into this place in the first place, was an apple tree. And the symbology is so deeply involved in here that these were the writing of the Bible, and a lot of these sacred documents were done by people on real high levels that knew how to talk on a lot of other levels than just one. And like the Bible, for example, what Stan Tenten has found, not only is the Bible have a story going through it, but he's found that every single letter in the Bible has deep mathematical significance, showing all the laws of the universe, how the universe was created. The very first line of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and he can show you this, describes in detail the Great Pyramid. Mathematically describes it in detail. The first thing, lays it all out in Hebrew. And so we're just not to the place yet where we're quite able to function in those kinds of levels, where you can read a book at about 100 different levels. The Emerald Tablets were written on 100 different levels. And you can read that from 100 different levels of consciousness and read something totally different into it, depending on who you are and at the time that you're reading it. So, you now begin to get the feel about how the geometry is a function inside of yourself, as well as the crystal patterns and these kinds of things. This is only one of the informational systems that we're going to be talking with. What I just showed was the internal structure, the beginning of life forms. And you can see how this geometry is used. Well, we're now going to jump out to the outer edge of the life form. We're going to look at the electromagnetic fields that are around the body, seeing how they correspond with these inner conceptual fields inside of there. So that you can see that these same shapes are around your body as well as in your body. And from there, it leads into some real interesting areas that we can begin to discuss. This is just a matter of record. Tchaikovsky, he had already been involved in underwater birth for a long time. They've been doing that for, I don't know how many, he had probably done at least, if I have to guess, maybe 20,000 births that were underwater. His daughter was in the 20s, I think, when this took place. It wasn't a real long time ago. And they had taken a woman to the Black Sea to give an underwater birth in the ocean. And they were sitting there all prepared for it, and the humans were all there, and she was kind of off the shore, hanging out in the water to give birth to this baby. And I believe it was these 3 dolphins came up, and they just pushed everybody away, and they just took over. And the dolphins come up when they do this, and they just do something to the whole system. And she gave birth to this baby with almost no pain or anything. It was a real phenomenal experience. And that began not just underwater birthing, but having dolphin midwives as birthing. Now people are actually doing this now, and there's something about the sonar that the dolphins do at the time of birth. And the dolphins go nuts. I mean, when they see, first of all, they love children. If you go swimming with dolphins, if there's kids around, they'll all go to the kids. If there's no kids, they'll go to the women. If there's no women, they'll go to the men. And if there's a woman that's pregnant, forget it. She gets total attention. And, I mean, that little baby's the greatest thing of all. And so they just go bananas when they see a human having birth, and they love it. And they can do things that are really, really amazing. And a lot of the dolphins the babies that are being born out of there, at least what's going on in Russia, are becoming really extraordinary children. So far, from everything I have read, out of all these babies that have born underwater birthing, there's not one of them with an IQ under 150. And they all have extremely stable emotional bodies, extremely strong physical bodies. They seem to be a superior race in one way or another. And the births that came out of France, there were over 20,000 births that came out of France also that were, and I read all the works of these guys, and one of the things they found is that they had these big tanks that they gave birth in, and when they first started doing it, they had all the instruments all laid out on tables and everything like that, with a doctor standing by in case there was a problem. And they didn't have a problem, and they didn't have a problem, and a year went by and they didn't have a problem, another year went by, and finally 20,000 births went by without one single complication. Not even one. By now they just got the thing stuck under a thing under there. They said they just put them up, put them away. He said because there just isn't any problems. For some reason, when a woman is floating in water, it seems like most of the complications just solve themselves. I don't know if they know why or not, but they do. And I got to spend some time with a woman who was an assistant with Tchaikovsky in Russia, and she brought back a whole bunch of the films you've probably never seen, because they were directly films out there, and I got to sit there and watch all this stuff. And I watched 2 movies of 2 different women giving birth, who not only were not in pain, not only were they neutral, they were having an orgasm. They were absolutely having an orgasm having this baby. It was total pleasure. And which I know that's the way it's supposed to be. It only makes sense. I know it's supposed to be that way, and they were proving it. So I have a great deal of respect. I don't know how we got into this thing, but I have a great deal of respect for underwater birthing, and the possibility of having dolphins there at the same time is truly remarkable. I know that in Russia, I've also seen the movies of this. They have babies that sleep on the bottom of swimming pools. They literally sleep on the bottom of the pool, underwater. And about every, I think it's 18 minutes, they come up while they're asleep, roll, take a breath, go back down and go to sleep again. And they can sleep. It's either 15 or 18 minutes. It's at least 15 minutes. But they can stay on the bottom of the pool. Dolphins can stay 20-something minutes, I think it is, between breaths. Each one. No, these babies were not just babies. They were like 2-3 years old. They were older. They just live in water. That's their home. They just live in water. And they're being given a name. What is it? It's like a different species almost. The people are calling them Homo dolphinus or something. It's like they're a blend between them, between the two. I mean, they're just so incredible in water. This is becoming their medium. And they're extremely intelligent, extremely intelligent. I think it's a very good trend, a very healthy trend that's happening. Though in the United States there's a lot of pressures against it. They've finally released some of it. I think you can do this now in Florida and California legally, I believe. Though around the world, you know, in New Zealand and Australia and places like this, there's lots of centers and much of it going off in Europe and everywhere else. It's getting stronger and stronger. The more women see other women not in pain,